This session here is about fear. Okay, so I'm afraid.
It's appropriate.
Appropriate. All right, so fear is a truth about me that I'm experiencing about my world. Remember, everything around me I'm having feelings about all the time. May not be aware of it, but I'm having feelings about it. When I'm afraid, if I can tell the truth about my fear, okay, I receive gifts and it meets needs that I have. The gift I receive is faith and wisdom. Now, we're going to explain that. But the need that's met, when I'm afraid, it's because I need refuge, protection, and help. That's all that means. It means somehow I'm in need of being helped, cared for, protected. And if I can't be afraid, okay, I will move towards something called anxiety, okay? Anxiety and control, trying to control the thing I'm afraid is going to happen. Anxiety that I can't, I'll be rehearsing all the possibilities. We'll talk about that. And then rage.
Yeah.
So rage is tied to fear. We're going to talk about that.
Well, that is one of the words that many of us grow up with that says, "Hey, don't ever do that word. Don't ever fear." And it's really damaging, Jeff, for a child or a person to be disarmed of being able to be afraid. And so fear is a natural experience of saying, hey, I live in a dangerous world. And in a dangerous world, dangerous things can happen, and dangerous things can happen to me. Therefore, I need something internally to let me know that I could potentially be in danger. And that's what fear does. Fear alerts me to the world I'm living in. Fear in its healthy form really leads to letting me be discerning and to grow wisdom and to grow in faith. For example, a pastor sometimes, and I'm not picking on pastors, we're both pastors, and so, but it's very common for pastors or Bible teachers to say, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. And by that, they can mean don't ever be afraid. But the very sermons they're saying that in, they have prepared because they've listened to healthy fear. They fear if they don't study well, it won't be accurate, or it won't be clear, or it won't be applicable. And so the very thing they're saying not to ever feel is the very thing that motivated them to study. And so it's a common example, every airline pilot has a pre-flight check because that pilot has fear something is wrong with the airplane, and they won't know it till they get in the air and there's a crash. And so
I lived in Alaska for 6 years. They would say a lot of people fly their own planes up there. There was a saying, there's old pilots and there's bold pilots, but there's no old, bold pilots. In other words, you don't fly with a pilot that's not afraid.
that's right.
Now, you don't want a pilot that's full of anxiety, but you want one that respects gravity and knows they better do the checklist, which is one of the gifts of fear.
That's right. And so we often will say, we've often heard actually, that faith and fear can't coexist. And sadly, that's so opposite of what's actually true. If I don't have fear, I don't really need faith. Now, we know positionally we need faith all the time. But if I'm not feeling afraid, if we were standing across a room from one another, Jeff, and you said, hey, Phil, I want you to trust me, and I want you to walk over here to me, I would go, okay, Jeff. I would just walk on across because we're on a slab. We're on a concrete slab here. However, if I could see through the floor and we were suspended over a 500-foot canyon, and you said, Phil, you can make it across this room to me. Just trust me and step out and do it. Then I would need faith when I was afraid. And so it's counterintuitive to how many of us have been taught, but fear is that feeling that says, I live in a dangerous place where danger potentially lurks, so I pay attention. And what do we parents want our children to do when they're afraid? Well, we want them to cry out to us for help. We want to help them. And so our Heavenly Father says, when you feel afraid, please cry out to me so I can be with you in your fear. And that builds faith. God is faithful to show up, and it builds wisdom. Discernment is made by not knowing and seeking help to know, or being discerning about, man, do I need to actually be where I am right now, or is this too dangerous? And so feeling fear says, I'm a human and I'm vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, I cry out for help from my friend, from the Lord. I cry out. And the gift I receive from that is this increase in wisdom and this increase in faith, which then begins to reveal my knowledge for refuge, my knowledge for help to show up.
Yeah, so fear is not the absence of faith. Fear is the confession of a human condition in a broken, fallen world that by faith reaches for help in a place we trust will give us that help.
Yeah.
That's the faith piece.
Yeah.
That's the faith piece. You know, if my this has happened to me with all my kids. You know, they'll cry out in the middle of the night. You know, healthy shame is they're not ashamed of that they need to cry out to wake me. I don't care if they're going to wake me up. They're scared, right? They're fearful. I don't want that child laying in bed trying to prove to me that they're not afraid. Even if I want to sleep, it doesn't matter. I love the fact that they know that they can cry out that either me or Brenda's going to come, okay? And it's their faith in us that they're crying out to us, Daddy, 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 to come into the room. Now, I have done that more times than I can count, walked into a dark room where there was some boogeyman somewhere in that room, under the bed or in a closet, and I got a scared child in that room, and they cried out to me for a reason.
Yeah.
And their faith in me was the cry out. That was their faith. When I walked in there, I can tell you this, I have never stood in a doorway, flipped on a light, and tried to rationally reason with that child to explain to them how their fear was wrong, okay, that there's never been a boogeyman in that room, and I sweep out under the closet, or under the bed, open up the closet, prove to them that they don't have to be afraid, then say, now go back to sleep. Mm-hmm. What's happened is I've walked into a dark room with a scared child, laid next to that child on that bed, put my arms around that child, and almost within moments, it's so quick, that child rests and falls asleep in my arms. You see, their faith cried out to me, and I was their refuge, their protection, and their help. And it didn't matter whether the lights were on or whether there wasn't a boogeyman in that room.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of fear. And I love the fact that my kids weren't ashamed of that about themselves and actually knew they could cry out to me for that kind of help.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that, with your children, with all children, it's intuitive and automatic.
Automatic.
This feels dangerous. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there's a dragon under my bed. So I'm going to cry out. And Dad's going to come in, and magically there's no documented cases of any dragons coming out from beds in the presence of a parent. It's kind of amazing, huh?
Magically.
So
think about the scripture. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's a scary place. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art what? With me. Thy rod and thy staff, it comforts me. Mm-hmm. And most of the fear nots in the scriptures say things like that. Fear not because I am with you. Fear not because I won't leave you. In fact, our greatest need is to not. Our greatest need is to be loved and accepted, which is our greatest fear is then going to be rejected. And so, how many times does the Bible even say, "I'll never leave you or forsake you"? I'm always going to be here for you, over and over and over again. And then we take other verses of the Bible out of context, like Philippians. Be anxious. Philippians 4:13. Be anxious for nothing.
yeah,
Okay. Anxiety is not fear. Anxiety is what happens when I'm rehearsing all the possible things that I'm afraid is going to happen so I can prepare myself for them when they happen, most of them which never will happen. But my head starts spinning because I'm trying to control my environment or people to keep what I'm afraid of from happening, because the brain doesn't know the future. It only knows the past. It's going to keep the past from happening again. So I'm going to get into my head all this anxiety, okay, to try to control what's happening. And God is saying that through the Apostle Paul in Philippians 3 or 4. He says, don't be anxious. You can't control this. Then he says, by prayer and supplication, make your requests known to me, and the peace of Christ, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds. Like, wow. No, you don't have to be anxious because I am with you. 1 John, this is used a lot. Perfect love casts out fear. So if I know the perfect love of God, I won't be afraid. That's used all the time.
Yeah.
Well, go to the context of 1 John. In that passage, John's not talking about not being afraid of your mom dying, your kid being killed in a car accident. Anything, bad things that could happen. Okay, failing a test, I don't care, you pick it. He's saying, in that context, You don't have to be afraid of what happens when you die if you know Jesus. And you know he knows you, and you'll know if you know him. And when you are deeply knowledgeable and experience the love of God, his love for you, your love for him, you don't have to be afraid of that day. It's talking about our eternal future.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing. Or how about this one? God has not given us a spirit of fear. Okay, well, that word's not even fear. God, it says God, the Greek word, God has not given us a spirit of cowardice, but of courage. Listen, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is I'm afraid and I'm going anyway. So we use all these things out of context to talk us out of that human condition of a child saying, Daddy, 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 I need help.
Yeah. And what's so sad about that too is so often a child's fear triggers a parent's fear. And rather than a parent admitting their own humanness and talking to that child about, I know what that's like, they will rage the child sometimes out of that, which kind of brings us to the far extension of anxiety. Jeff, that was such a clear picture of anxiety, how the predictive nature of the brain. And I've often told people that what anxiety does, it provides a guarantee. And here's the guarantee. The guarantee is no matter how bad it is, whatever it is, you will have seen it coming. And so that's the ultimate guarantee. I mean, you may not be able to keep the diagnosis, the breakup, the whatever from coming, but at least you saw it coming, and that feels like control. And so what happens if we live in that control territory, refusing fear, listening to those messages to don't ever feel afraid, it hardens into something called rage. So often, how many times have we seen it, Jeff, not just clinically, but anecdotally in relationships? And certainly, I think probably everyone watching this video has seen someone raging and believed it to be just anger. Rage is a terror response. It's a terror reaction to being vulnerable. And I'll give you an example. If you have a beloved pet, it's a very common scenario, and you've owned that pet's been a part of your family for years and years, and the pet becomes injured, some kind of injury. If you walk over to get close to that pet, to touch that pet somewhere, that pet that loves you deeply will growl and bark and even snap at you. Well, that little pet is not mad at you. It's terrified of being hurt, being vulnerable again. And so that's what rage is. And so rage is so often mistaken for anger. So we talk about don't be angry, and that's another teaching. But so just to help you with that distinction, if you're watching this video, when people are raging, and sometimes that comes in the form of the silent freeze out, biting sarcasm, not fun sarcasm that we do a lot of bantering and those kinds of the friendship, the language of friendship. It's the sarcasm that bites and the sarcasm that victimizes and cuts people to pieces. Obviously, the very evident ones of, profane-laced tirades and turning things over and causing physical harm. Those are classic presentations of rage. But just know that when people are doing some form of rage, they've lost control that anxiety promised to give them, and they're now acting out to create distance between them and their own vulnerability. And so that's an important thing to recall, to distinguish between anger and rage. So fear is the breeding ground of wisdom and discernment and a growing faith that says, in my fear, I cry out. And when I cry out, I receive that wisdom and faith and discernment I'm looking for. And this revealed need for refuge and help, what children need in the dark, happen. And if we live in refusal of that, we end up in these places of control and this guarantee that I'll see it coming, and ultimately that's not enough security, and we rage in our terror against being hurt again. So fear is a real touchstone, a real capstone of what makes us human, to recognize our vulnerability and to reach for a relationship with God and with others.
And a lot of times I won't always be aware of how afraid I am, but I know I'm experiencing these impairments. Like I find myself being anxious, or I'll be in a situation where I'm raging. I can feel it. Even if it's not coming out, I feel it. And one of the ways I back into the vulnerability is I'll find myself in the car, stuff coming out of my mouth toward people I don't even know, okay? And I'll check myself and I'll say, gosh, Jeff, what are you afraid of here? What are you afraid of? Or I'll lay in bed at night if my head is spinning with in anxiety of all these things that are coming on. I stop and I say, through the impairments, I back my way into the vulnerability of my fear.
Yeah.
And in the confession of that, by faith, then I really say, well, what do I need? It may be something I need from Brenda, maybe something I need from you, certainly maybe something I need from God, or also maybe something where I just need to be wise. Like that's where the wisdom piece is, to take precaution. Like it's wisdom that I put my seatbelt on because I've seen some crash videos, like that's just wise.
That's right.
But fear is a huge light on the dashboard that's telling me something. And I'm either going one or two directions with it.
That's exactly right. And just, I think a great way to conclude this would be, let's take your example, really common as traffic increases. We call it road rage. And sometimes people will say, well, I feel more anger than anything. So here's what's important too. We're walking through these feelings one at a time. What you're describing, Jeff, I do feel angry when someone cuts me off in traffic. And when I become angry, it reminds me of my vulnerability. And in my vulnerability and terror, I rage at that point. And so it's not so much that when I'm raging, I don't feel anger at all. It's that my rage comes from the terror I'm experiencing and being vulnerable. So this is like we said earlier, it's just a real key to in our humanness, recognizing our need for relationship and for safety.